This is DW News, live from Berlin, opening a new path for aid to reach Gaza. EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen says the first ship delivering international aid to Gaza is due to leave Cyprus via a new sea corridor. Months of war have left around 2 million facing the threat of famine. Also on the programme, US President Joe Biden delivers his State of the Union address, hitting out at Republicans and hoping to reassure doubters that he's ready for an election rematch with Donald Trump. And Turkish state media report that President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says upcoming elections at the end of this month will be his last. I'm Phil Gale. Welcome to the programme. International efforts are taking shape to set up a path by sea to deliver urgently needed aid to millions of people in Gaza. EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen said the corridor between Cyprus and Gaza could begin operating this weekend. Only a limited amount of aid has been reaching the territory by land because of Israeli blockades. The UN has warned millions there are facing the threat of famine.
EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen visits Cyprus, the starting point for a new maritime aid corridor to Gaza.
And today we are facing a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. And we stand by the innocent civilians in Palestine. And this is why Europe is financing a major humanitarian aid effort for Palestinians in Gaza and in the region. We are now very close to the opening of the corridor, hopefully this Sunday. And I'm very glad to see that an initial pilot operation will be launched today.
The EU will work together with the United States, the UAE and other countries to ship food, medicine and equipment for shelter from a port in Cyprus straight to a temporary pier that the United States says it will build on the coast of Gaza. Several countries continue to parachute food parcels into the Gaza Strip as the risk of starvation on the ground is spreading. These aid convoys recently passed over the border from Egypt, but others are blocked from crossing by Israeli authorities or protesters. Any food that does arrive is hard to come by. And is often a dangerous pursuit.
Aid entered and we got some flour, thank God. As soon as we walked, the Israelis shot us. They shot us. Praise God, bullets hit my fingers. I lost them, and I have a bullet in my shoulder.
The new initiative to deliver aid by sea has yet to set sail. The UN welcomes the effort, but says that land routes remain the optimal way to get all forms of aid into Gaza.
Well, Ahmed Bayram is Regional Media and Communication Advisor for the Norwegian Refugee Council. I asked him how realistic it is that this new maritime corridor could open this weekend.
Good evening, Phil. Thanks for having me. In terms of this being realistic, probably. I mean, we hope so, at least, that, you know, any aid from any side of the border comes in to Gaza. However, the question is, what happened to the actual land routes that we have? Have we given up on those? Have we given up on convincing Israel to allow more aid in? And have we given up on diplomacy as a tool of bringing some relief to people who are literally starving in Gaza right now? I mean, this scheme is welcome because people are so desperate, particularly in northern Gaza, where we are hearing reports of children dying of malnutrition. However, what we need to see is the reopening, the full reopening of the land crossings in Rafah and Kerem Shalom.
Right. Well, perhaps you could answer your own question. Do you believe that we have given up on reopening the land crossings?
I mean, all this distraction we're hearing in the media, all this new promotion of port and maritime routes, and this corridor from Cyprus, does tell us that it looks like the ramping up of aid routes, land routes, which are the fastest, the most efficient, and the most affordable, the least expensive, and the quickest. It looks like we are now looking at a scenario where, this has been politicized, so politicized that we're not able to, bring in just extra a few hundred trucks a day to relieve the people. So it looks like more and more, it looks like the diplomacy and politics is now, interfering in the works of aid and aid relief efforts. And at the same time, we're looking at Rafah, which is the zone where, you have two crossings, one Rafah, one in Kerem Shalom, that have been obstructed over the past few weeks. So probably the answer is, I hope not, but it looks like, these alternatives, it looks like they are being floated as a substitute to land routes, and this is the real danger here.
All right. What is the danger? If aid is coming in via sea, and we also have this American announcement of this temporary port in due course, but if aid is coming in by sea, so long as the aid gets in, why does it matter whether it comes by sea or by land?
It does matter, because while we're brainstorming how we're going to bring this in, how we're going to construct, where we're going to construct the port, how long it's going to take, there are people who are starving at the moment. And the danger is, as I said, in promoting this as the holy grail, as the replacement of aid routes. And, of course, if that takes place, there are questions about inspections, about who's going to oversee, who's going to have control over inspections. Is Israel going to also interfere in the shipments that are coming in? Who is going to actually, offload these boxes off the ship docks? It's a whole catalogue of questions that we have to ask, all while, displaced people, pregnant mothers, children starve and have to skip meals. And, we're talking about Ramadan in the next few days, and that's another reminder that people have been actually almost fasting to death here. Right. In Gaza. So that's the danger. We should not be distracted from the solution, which is the land routes through Rafah, through Kerem Shalom. Okay. There are thousands of trucks that could be crossing, and that's what needs to be encouraged.
Given us much to think about. Thank you for joining us, Ahmed Bayram from the Norwegian Refugee Council.
Thank you.
Germany is one of a number of countries urging Israel and Hamas to reach a ceasefire in Gaza before the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, but that looks unlikely at the moment. Israel has launched its offensive against Hamas militants following the October 7th terror attacks. In Arab East Jerusalem, Ramadan preparations are happening in the shadow of the war. And DW has been talking to people there about what they're expecting from the Muslim holy month.
East Jerusalem's old city. It's usually festive at this time of year. But the war in Gaza has left many here in a somber mood. Now, shops are open, but there are no decorations or lights.
There are no festivities. You don't feel Ramadan. There are people who have food to eat, but there are a lot of people that won't be able to eat because there's no food, like in Gaza. This is not Ramadan. It's more like a funeral home to pay condolences. The situation is very sad. We can't even think about what will happen, and we can't even comprehend what is happening. There is no sense of anything festive. There is no Ramadan.
Beyond the depressed mood, there are also worries about the Al-Aqsa Mosque, one of Islam's holiest places, also known as the Temple Mount, the holiest site in Judaism. After Hamas called on Palestinians to visit in great numbers during Ramadan, right-wing members of Israel's cabinet called for severe restrictions on visitors. But earlier this week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel would admit a similar number of visitors as in previous years. This was welcomed by the Islamic custodian of the holy site.
We are very delighted that there are matters that have started to become clear to Muslims in this blessed month regarding the opening of the doors of Al-Aqsa Mosque to all visitors without age restrictions, according to the decisions we have heard and learned about.
There is one bright spot, special Ramadan sweets, Khotayef, a filled folded pancake.
There is no Ramadan without Khatayef. Everyone will have it. Bring it home to eat.
Some traditions endure no matter what, as Muslims in East Jerusalem and around the world prepare for their holy month.
Now to the US, where President Biden has delivered his State of the Union address. In addition to outlining plans to get more aid into Gaza, he took aim at Donald Trump ahead of November's likely election rematch.
Joe Biden used his State of the Union address to make the case for a second term in office, firing several broadsides at Republican frontrunner Donald Trump, never referring to him by name, only as my predecessor. He opened his address by declaring democracy under threat at home and abroad, and criticizing Trump for inviting Russia to invade NATO countries if they don't spend more on defense.
Now my predecessor, a former Republican president, tells Putin, quote, "Do whatever the hell you want." That's a quote. A former president actually said that, bowing down to a Russian leader. I think it's outrageous. It's dangerous and it's unacceptable.
Biden framed the upcoming election as a choice between revenge and decency. He vowed to restore federal abortion rights, recommitted U.S. support for Ukraine, and spent a large portion of his 68-minute address on the war in the Middle East, unveiling plans to build a temporary port for aid deliveries to Gaza by sea. Trump kept up a steady stream of replies on his Truth Social site, defending himself and blasting Biden for what he described as, quote, the angriest, least compassionate, and worst State of the Union speech ever made. Trump attacked Biden over border security, which has emerged as a central theme of the 2024 campaign.
What's happened now is a horror show. The country, our country, is being laughed at all over the world. Over the past 3 years, Biden has actively aided and abetted the importation of millions and millions of illegal alien migrants and resettled them into your communities. At any time during the past 3 years, crooked Joe Biden, and he is crooked as you can be and the most incompetent president we've ever had, could have called off the invasion. But to this day, he is keeping the hordes of illegal migrants and illegal aliens pouring into the country.
If elected, Trump is promising to launch the largest deportation operation in American history. Polls show a majority of Americans trust Republicans more than Democrats on securing the border. In his address, Biden accused Republicans of playing politics with the border by stalling and derailing a bipartisan bill on security reforms because his predecessor told them to.
Our correspondent Janelle Dumoulin in Washington talked me through the main takeaways of the president's speech.
Well, this was a State of the Union speech with a lot of objectives. He had to tout his achievements at home and abroad. He had to lay out a vision for a potential second term. But by far, his biggest mission was to dispel concerns about his age and his fitness, to dispel concerns that he could not lead the country for potentially 4 more years with energy and with vigor, even at the age of 81. And by most measures, he was able to deliver on that mission. This was quite a forceful speech. There were apparently more than 80 exclamation points in the text. At times, it certainly felt like more. But he was able to ad-lib with Republicans, go back and forth with them as they were catcalling and booing. He made jokes. He called bluffs. Now, this wasn't a stumble-free speech. It was also marked at many points by his need to cough. But in most of the ways that count, he really was able to deliver on that mission. He was able to show that he was in command, in control, that he had fight in him, and that was something that was very important to be able to show, especially to those watching at home.
Yeah, who was he hoping to reach?
Well, just because of the timing of the State of the Union, it really did set up the general election fight between him and Donald Trump, who, again, he did not refer to by name, simply referred to him as my predecessor. He did that 13 or so times. But it's important to note that this is going to be the most prominent platform that he has before the election. It's also a platform that Donald Trump doesn't have. So he really did use that platform to reach out to voters who might be undecided between him and Trump. He reminded them of the threat that Donald Trump poses to democracy. He reminded them about January 6th and how Donald Trump, quote, sought to bury the truth about January 6th, referring, of course, to that event where Trump supporters sought to overturn the results of the 2020 election and rioted at the Capitol. He said in an attack to Trump that you can't only love your country if you win. So what he was doing here was trying to reach out to voters to distinguish himself, himself from Donald Trump and urge them to vote for him and not Trump.
And a word about reactions to the speech beyond Donald Trump.
Yes, well, Republicans have already called this State of the Union overly political and divisive, but of course they weren't going to like it anyway. If he had been moderate and conciliatory, they would have said it was a weak speech. But in terms of ordinary Americans, there was a poll released by CNN and SSRS saying that 6 to 10 Americans reacted positively to the speech, with 35% saying that they reacted very positively. It's really hard to know whether, the State of the Union speech will translate into votes at the ballot box. The election is quite far away in November, but it's fair to say that this was a pivotal moment in Joe Biden's campaign, and this is a win for him more than anything else.
OK, thanks for that, Janelle. Janelle Dumoulin in Washington. Now to Turkey, where President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says this month's local elections will be his last as president, suggesting that he won't stand for another term. His comments came during a visit by his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky. President Erdogan also said he was ready to host a peace summit between Ukraine and Russia and that Turkey would contribute to the reconstruction of Ukraine when the war ends. Recep Tayyip Erdogan has led his country for more than 20 years, winning more than a dozen elections since 2002. He won his current 5-year term in hotly contested elections last May. Let's get more from our correspondent, Dorian Jones, in Istanbul. Welcome, Dorian. Help us untangle what the president's reported to have said, because elections at the end of this month are local rather than presidential.
Well, indeed, and why he has made these statements has provoked quite a lot of discussion, and certainly he has rekindled questions about his health throughout his presidency. He has been dogged by rumours of ill health, but it could also simply be an election ploy, because at the end of the month we have very hotly contested local elections, none more so than here in Istanbul, where Erdogan is desperate to oust the incumbent Ekrem İmamoğlu, and that contest is too close to call. So it could be an attempt by Erdogan to consolidate his base ahead of these critical elections. He used similar statements in last year's presidential election, pressing heavily on the fact that this is his last campaign, and it was seen as an attempt to consolidate his base, and it did work then. But it has to be also said, his words were very careful. He said the reason why this is his last is nothing to do with any questions of health. It's purely because of the Constitution, and it's widely expected that next year he is expected to try and introduce a new Constitution, and it's widely rumoured that the end of term limits could be one of those changes, which would open the door for him standing again.
All right, OK. Away from that, the president has just held a press conference regarding his meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. What did they say?
Well, there was a lot to be discussed in this meeting. One of the key things in the agenda was Zelensky calling for more arms is expected. When he arrived here, before he met with Erdogan, he visited a shipyard where there's been built a warship for the Ukrainian Navy. It's also rumoured that among the discussions is pressing Erdogan for delivering of large amounts of munitions. Ukraine is in desperate need of artillery shells, and Turkey possibly could be providing those. But along with that, there was also discussions about possibly renewing or trying to revive the grain export deal, which allowed Ukraine to export large amounts of grain to the world markets, which did help to drive down food prices. That ended when Russia walked away from the deal, and there have been discussions about how to continue to export grain. Currently, there are these what called humanitarian safe corridors. The two leaders are expected to have talked about further extending those and increasing grain exports, and also the question of peace talks. Erdogan is very keen to position himself as a guy that can facilitate or possibly to bring an end to this conflict, although there does appear to be a difference between the two leaders. Zelensky didn't show much interest in any idea of having a sit-down meeting with his Russian counterparts, which Erdogan is pressing for. Instead, he's calling for Erdogan to attend this peace conference, which is excluding Russia. And Erdogan is not very enthusiastic about that. So there was some difference between the two leaders. But this meeting certainly underscored how Erdogan likes to see himself as a key player in this conflict.
Thank you for that, Dorian. DW correspondent Dorian Jones in Istanbul. We'll take a look at some more stories making headlines around the world. Gunmen have abducted at least 200 Nigerian school pupils from a school in the northwestern town of Kuriga in Kaduna State. Authorities are still trying to confirm the exact number taken. Abductions of students for ransom are common in the region. In 2014, extremists kidnapped more than 200 girls from Chibok village. Greek students have clashed with police in Athens during a demonstration against government plans to introduce privately run universities. Protesters threw petrol bombs and fireworks at police who tried to disperse the crowds with tear gas. The legislation would make degrees from approved private institutions equivalent to those from public universities. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has warned that a backlash against women's rights is threatening progress across the world. Marking International Women's Day, he said global crises are hitting women and girls hardest, from poverty and hunger to climate disaster, war and terror. He described the situation in Afghanistan as the most egregious example. Well, out of the more than 400,000 soldiers currently serving in the Ukrainian armed forces, around 20% are women. The majority serve in supporting roles, but some have gone to fight on the front lines in the country's ongoing war against the Russian invasion. Getting that chance was a fight in itself, as Max Sander reports.
One shot. One kill. Meet Alexandra. She used to work in a bakery. Now she's a sniper. Today she shows us what she does on a 100-meter range somewhere in central Ukraine. At the front line, her targets can be more than a kilometer away. Her job takes skill and a certain mindset.
Well, I see my enemy. I see the occupier who came to our land to destroy our state, our people. Nothing more.
She says many still question her ability to do this because she's a woman. Women have long served in the Ukrainian armed forces, but few take part in combat. The woman who shot this video is another one. It's last fall near Avdiivka. Ukrainian soldiers are holding the line against a Russian onslaught. After hours of battle, they bring their wounded to safety. We meet Elena in Donbas region. When not fighting, she stays in a village. She says joining the war changed her life.
Here I feel life on my tongue, on my lips. I feel much more than I did in civilian life.
Before the war, she was a communication trainer in Kyiv. Now Olena clears trenches with the infantry. She had to push for a frontline job.
He asked me, "Do you really want a combat position? It's difficult, and not all commanders accept girls in combat positions." I said, "I don't care. What's going on with the commanders? I don't care how hard it is. I know for sure that I can."
She has been decorated for her courage by President Zelensky. Yet it's not all bravado. This video was recorded after a battle with heavy losses.
Be cursed, everyone who's behind this.
Back in central Ukraine, sniper Alexandra takes us to the temporary flat she shares with her husband, who also joined up. As a sniper, where you need to be invisible, she says being as small as she is can be an advantage. And women in general can be less emotionally driven than men, she suggests.
They are not only less aggressive, but also think more about each task. That is, they do not do it suddenly, but try to think it over, analyze it, and carry it out with a cool head, thinking more about safety and those around them.
That's not a view shared by many in the military.
Every woman in the army has to show that she is worthy to be in the same combat position and fight on an equal footing with a man.
That's something infantry soldier Olena has also had to do. She says she has been accepted by her peers, but 2 years into the war, as Ukraine struggles to fill the ranks, many women who want to follow her example have a fight on their hands to do so.
Just time to remind you of our top story at this hour. EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen says the first ship carrying international humanitarian aid is preparing to leave Cyprus for Gaza via a new sea corridor. And that's you up to date. I'll be back in just a moment to take you through the big stories of the day, today on International Women's Day, looking at the referendum regarding women in Ireland and also abortion rights around the world. That's with me in just a moment.